December meeting of the Drum Point Board of Directors. And we will, well, let's go ahead and get the minutes approved so we can move on from that. We have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting. Okay, second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So, let's jump right into our guest speaker, and Jim, you can make a formal introduction.
Okay.
That way, we'll get that out of the way, we'll talk, talk and listen to you and ask questions or whatever, and then we can kick you out.
Okay.
So you don't have to put up with us.
I appreciate that.
This is Autumn Phillips Lewis, and she owns a company called Eco Haven, and she does solarization of Phragmites, and I don't know if you do other species as well, but I think your main focus is Phragmites in the
Yeah,
area.
yeah, we do. We're a full services ecological consulting company, so we are working on native plantings and restoration areas, meadow establishment, invasive species removal, and the solarization of Phragmites falls under that. And I know you all have been doing some herbicide application of Phragmites. That's certainly the most common way to treat it. I know it does take quite a few years to get that to actually work. And what we've done is use solarization, which is something we kind of developed, I guess, with the Smithsonian environmental researchers. They've used that in some other sites, and we kind of implemented it on the ground in the Parkers Creek watershed in some smaller isolated patches, and we had really good success with that working in just a single season. And so the way that works is we cut it down with weed whackers that have metal tri-blades attached to them. We cut it as low as we can, right to ground level, and then cover that with 6mm black plastic for an entire season. So normally we would cut that in the very early spring and leave it on all the way until the next spring. So
It's a year.
yes, yep, a whole year. The way it works is somewhat, it heats the soil underneath, but it also works primarily actually by blocking the light and blocking photosynthesis, so the plant can't actually produce any energy. Most of its energy is stored in underground rhizomes. That's how it spreads the most, not really by seed, although it can spread by seed too, for sure. But primarily through underground rhizomes. So that tarp for a year keeps the plant from producing any energy. There certainly could be some regrowth afterwards, so it's not, you never have to go back to it again, but we've seen really good success with very little regrowth in just 1 year. And actually the native plants have started to repopulate the areas, particularly on those smaller sites where there was good native seed bank around it, to kind of disperse into that area. I'm not sure if anybody, is there anything else in particular we need to cover? I know.
What about grants?
Yeah, so I forget, I think you told me, are you all a nonprofit, a 501c3?
No, we're not C3, we're
Okay.
C7, aren't we?
C4?
For C4? Okay.
All right.
But we're not for profit, but we don't qualify like as a charity type organization.
Right. Okay, I might have to look into the exact, some grants can only go to nonprofits, 501c3s. Some can go to community groups or even for-profit businesses, so it just depends on which grant you would be interested in applying for. There's not a ton of grants specifically for invasive species removal. That's kind of a hard one to get funded, but not impossible. It depends on how you want to spin it. A lot of the grants, especially through like the Chesapeake Bay Trust, are community engagement oriented. I don't really know if that would apply here, if you'd have any volunteers or anybody who would want to be engaged, but that's kind of that component. And then the other factor would be how large of an area you're looking at, and therefore the cost. Some grants, for example, BGE is one that I've done a lot. They're green grants. Those are ones that can only go to community groups, but they would fund a project like this but they're usually only like the $5,000 range. So it depends on what you're, how big of an area you're looking at doing, what the cost would be.
Do you know how big the area is down on Lake Terrace?
I'm not sure,
I was just wondering.
but that was pretty well eradicated down there. Mark said he would have to just do some spot spring next year. And some of it was in the water too. how do you treat stuff, fragmites when it's moved into the water?
The same way, so we actually have a really big project over at Calvert Cliff State Park right now. It's by far the largest one we've done. And it's also the first one we've done right on the bay. So that was a little bit of a learning experience to see how that would go, because it's very high energy there. And the plastic didn't really stay on the bay itself. So I'm not sure, is the place you're talking about on the bay or on the cove?
Oh, it's on
It's on Drum Point Lake.
Lake.
Okay, so it would probably be okay. It's just the high wave energy on the bay. But we do the same thing. We have it underwater in other places too, where we cut it as low as we can, and then we just stake it down in the water.
But I know that you talked to the Drum Point Club. Why, were you not able to get them a grant?
No, we didn't talk about grants really with them. I think they were just looking at funding it through their operating budget. And I'm forgetting the person's name right now that I talked to, but I don't know, I never really heard anything back from him. He seemed really interested and said they were gonna talk about it at their board meeting and he would let me know, and then I never heard back, so.
Because they have big, thick stands that have never been treated.
Yeah, so
And
I did
did you-
go to
did
see
you go
those.
see it?
Yeah, I did. I didn't hear back from them on that.
Are the grants you're talking about, so they're from different sources?
Yeah, yeah.
Are some of them like DNR or anything, or are they all,
I could look into DNR, I've never applied for a DNR grant specifically to do invasive species removal. I've applied for DNR grants for other types of projects, like more restoration, stream
Right.
restoration type
Right.
stuff, but not for invasive species removal. We did, the Chesapeake Ranch Estates, we applied for a grant for them through the NIFWF, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. That one was not funded. And we have another application into the Chesapeake Bay Trust, which is another one that I would look at for you all. They're big funders, but they are more so focused on community engagement. Not always, but a lot of their programs, that's one of their big.
now what do you mean by community engagement?
It would be more of like an educational or a way to engage, say, volunteers, like if you had volunteers or students that wanted to come in, or to design some sort of education program around it. That's how we did with the ranch estates. We are also doing kind of like a community awareness and education about invasive species at the same time.
Was that grant successful for CRE?
We turned in one last year and we just missed the funding cut. We were like so close. We talked to them afterwards and they gave us some pointers to change for this year, so we did that and we haven't heard back yet as to whether or not it's funded, but we should go back soon. So that might be.
Yeah, what's the time frame? Like if you apply for a grant, how long does it take before you hear back whether you will get it or not?
It depends on the grant. So Chesapeake Bay Trust, we turned that one in August, and we find out in December at some point. Usually a couple months, but I've also turned one in January and not found out till November. So sometimes it's a long time. The one at Calvert Cliffs was funded through a private foundation.
As you probably know, we've been treating ours for about 5 years. We just finished the 5th year of treatment. And the Lake Terrace that Jenny was referring to has only been treated twice because there was some dispute about whether it was our property or the property owner's property. And that's pretty much, Mark Smith told me that that's pretty much gone. So we don't have a lot of active growth right now. I mean, that's why I was hoping you would have done something on the club, because they have just huge stands of it.
Right.
And that would be very effective, I think,
Yeah.
in that kind of application.
So do you, who does the work? Is it, you have a staff of people who do this, who?
Well, we're a pretty small company. It was, right now it's mostly just me. I'm gonna hire like part-time staff to do all the field season work, but I'm the sole owner and do all the grant writing and things like that.
Okay, so you're out there with a weed whacker and you're hauling parts and all that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Taylor and I did all of the Calvert Cliffs one, but with that one, it was a unique setup where, Taylor and I were certainly out there doing a lot of the work, but the way that one was written, they were responsible for volunteer hours for part of the matching funds, and so we had the Maryland Conservation Corps out there with us as well. So it just depends on the project. how that
Yeah,
works.
I saw the Calvert Close project, and that is an expansive project.
Yeah.
And then I was wondering how it fared after the Northeaster came in.
Yeah,
Because I saw it like the day before that, and
Mhm.
it came through, and I was wondering if the tarps, if you
yeah,
had to go out there and recover tarps, or.
yeah. Unfortunately, we have two different, it wasn't planned, but we have two different brands of tarps out there, and
Mhm.
one has definitely held up better than the other, so that will be good to know going forward. Because they're both 6 mil black plastic, but there's just a difference in brands and.
Hmm, that's interesting.
And obviously you can't do anything if there are rocks involved.
How do you mean?
Well, I know of an area where it's all rocks going down to like the beach,
Uh-huh.
and they're growing in the rocks.
Is this
So I
like your
can't
property?
imagine you
They probably put it
weed
everywhere.
whacking.
Yeah, actually, so I will say we haven't done any like that yet, but I think we are going to do one for Windward Harbor community down in Solomons this year, this spring, and that is how theirs is. So that will be our first attempt at doing one in a rocky environment, but yeah, we're gonna cut it as low as we can and put the black tarps over, and it should work pretty much the same. It would be better if you can cut it lower, but it wouldn't be the first time we can't cut it lower, like at Calvert Cliff, sometimes even at low tide, the water is so high, you just can't cut it at ground
Mhm.
level, so. Yeah, I think it would still be okay.
Is there a, sort of a nominal pricing structure that you use, like, square furlong or fortnight or?
It is calculated by square footage, so we have, just to figure out the materials and the labor per square foot, and that's how it
Okay.
goes out.
So you have to kind of figure that out individually?
I do, yeah, we have a separate calculation for every single property we do, because for example, the one that I was just referencing at Windward Harbor, their maintenance crew has cut that a couple of times, so it's really thin and sparse, and so our labor cost to cut that down will be much less than say at Calvert Cliffs, where it was very dense and very tall for a long time. Just depends on the site. And ease of access, how long it takes to get there.
I really have only one question, and it's, we've been doing this for what, how many
5
years?
years.
For 5 years?
We
5
just
years.
finished that for 5 years.
So we basically don't have a lot of Phragmites. And, okay, it'll probably start growing back, but when's it gonna become a problem for us? Another 2, 3, 5 years?
Well, I think the main reason why we're looking into it, if it does come back, my thoughts are, and I know some people here disagree with me, but, continuing to put chemicals into the water when there's a different way, a better way of handling the Phragmites, I think we should definitely think about it. I think we should consider it. We should know what the options are.
Absolutely
forward.
correct, I absolutely agree with you. But there is also the concept of bang for buck. What is the cost advantage and what's the cost difference? Because, the chemicals that are being used, or have been used by the state of Maryland for God knows how many years, they're approved by the state. And what's the cost difference between what sounds like a very labor-intensive process as opposed to just a spraying process?
I think you're looking at it short-term instead of long-term, and if we're doing damage to our environment.
I would
Is
think,
there any evidence of damage?
yeah, I would think Maryland would have been worried about that a long time ago. They're still using these chemicals, and they've been using them for years.
And they're adapted for wetland environment.
That's,
Well, can I ask you, why do you tarp instead of spray?
It did stem from not wanting to put herbicides and chemicals in the water, and we just wanted to try different options, and I was really sold on it when I saw how quickly it was effective. I've seen DNR come and spray on properties that I manage, and it made absolutely no difference. So, to see the results in 1 year now, it is more expensive, I will tell you, it is. So, you have to, I guess, if you want shorter term results, it might be a better option, and if you are worried about chemical buildup in your waterways, then it is another option, so. And I think you can definitely find plenty of data that supports probably either way. I mean, if you research glyphosate, there's a lot of data that suggests that it does build up in waterways and it could impact fish and aquatic organisms, but, by the same token, you could probably find, I'm sure you can find studies that say otherwise, and obviously it is approved chemicals.
Well, I mean, the flip side, what you're saying is that, yeah, we have treated it and we've knocked most of it out. And so what we'd probably be looking at would be, areas of regrowth or of spread where it's, it's blown in or whatever. And
But it will.
or maybe, if we're looking at small scale stuff, we could afford, throw a tarp down and whack out.
Yeah, I have no argument with that.
Right.
No argument at all whatsoever, but you gotta realize, well, okay, when we started this whole thing, some of these areas
Oh,
were.
yeah. It's actually been quite effective.
And the spraying has worked, I mean, and I realize, okay, I'm not a scientist, I simply will, my choice is to go with what the state of Maryland has approved and uses themselves and has been using for years. They're very concerned about marshlands and duck licenses, and it's money to the state. And so, I'll follow their lead, I mean, I'm not a scientist. But, we don't have a whole lot at this point. And, and I keep pointing out, as you have seen, the spraying of the Phragmites in front of my house,
It doesn't come
and
back.
the dune grasses are back like crazy.
They sprayed, Carl sprayed, Mark sprayed it once.
Yeah, he sprayed me once, and then it was like, I think maybe 18 months after that, suddenly,
No Phragmites.
no Phragmite, and the whole area is covered with dune grass.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's ineffective, I'm not fighting that.
But I mean, it just came, I mean, it didn't take seasons to get rid of that Phragmites.
Yeah, 1 year.
But we still have been spraying.
Oh, yeah.
For a couple of
Oh, yeah.
years, so
Yeah.
we're still adding.
Well,
to
the
it.
biggest one was the Lake Terrace one, which didn't get included in the 5-year plan because of the ownership dispute.
No, but the whole thing is when I guess what my bottom line is, the problem will come back, not to argue with you, but it's an invasive species. You can kill it any way you want, it will be back. It'll either
Even the
wash in, it'll blow in, whatever way, it'll be back. The same way it got here originally, it'll be back. So when it comes back, we have to solve the problem. But at this point, it's almost like Woody Allen once said, we're discussing naming a child by a future marriage.
Have you guys replanted the areas at all, or have you seen vegetation come back in
It's coming
naturally?
back.
It's coming back
Coming
by
back
itself,
myself.
Yeah.
so far. Well, I guess along the causeway, has it come back?
Yeah,
or-
a lot of it has come back.
Well, we've had a lot of erosion along the causeway too, we've had a lot of precipitations and things as well,
Mm.
so it's hard to tell. It seems like the area has gotten smaller
Yeah.
because of erosion.
Yeah. Yeah. But when we had, our strategy was to cut down the dead canes after the spring, 6 to 8 was, I think, usually a couple months. And stuff hasn't come back, I mean, and we had, I think the DNR said we had 2 years before we'd have to replant to see what would come back naturally. And a lot of it's come back naturally. It's just quite amazing, really.
Yeah, and I guess just to play devil's advocate, if you're always gonna have to deal with it, I guess if you're not concerned about chemicals, it might not be an issue, but if you are, and you always have to, if you're always gonna have to deal with it, you might wanna think about.
But you might have to deal with it
You're gonna have to
too.
deal with it your way.
I know,
So
but
is
I
it-
guess I'm saying that the point is that dealing with it my way doesn't keep adding more chemicals and
Mhm.
bioaccumulating in the
Right.
water. So if you're gonna have to keep dealing with it either way, that might be something to consider. But if you're not concerned with chemicals, then that wouldn't factor into your decision.
Better living through chemistry.
Yes.
Well, I think
Is
it's,
that down?
Do you think Dow came up with that?
I don't know.
I think right now, I mean, in a couple of years, we might want to consider it, if
Yeah,
stuff
right.
does grow back.
Right.
I mean, I think it's, right now, we're pretty much on top of it. Amazing.
yeah, but if it does, if we have
Oh, yeah,
areas.
if it comes back, we're gonna have to,
Then
Figure
we
it
can, then we could do a comparison.
Yeah,
and
cost,
Yeah,
cost
that's-
comparison, and the trade-off.
Do a trade-off and see how much, you know, how much more money does it cost.
As opposed to what I sound like, I'm not opposed to it. It's just, you know, right now, where would we do it?
Yeah, and I guess another thing I'm just thinking about as you're talking about comparing the two methods, if you are gonna, which I don't know, you're right, in a way, it's an invasive species, but if you can get it wiped out and get native vegetation reestablished, that will certainly make it harder to come back. But, you know, if the herbicide treatment takes 5 years, you have a 5-year cycle where you're fighting it
It
to
didn't-
reset versus if
It
we.
didn't take 5 years, I mean, every year we got like 90% and then 90% of the rest and 90% of the rest, so.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't like every year it all grew back.
Right.
It wasn't the case.
Yeah,
But
but I
it-
guess I'm saying if it takes 5 years every time it comes back, then that's a 5-year period of fighting it versus maybe only 1-year period of fighting it. So you're reducing your time of fighting it versus
Right.
time of
You have to look at the life cycle
Yeah,
cost,
yeah,
is
right,
what
yeah.
you're basically saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've got all of Autumn's information, right, so.
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested in just knowing what the cost is per square foot. I don't know what, how much.
The club was given a,
That was, yeah, that was a while ago.
no, I mean, it's still.
It's
Should
for
be some
comparison.
comparison.
Do you have a,
But I'd like
do
to
you
know,
have
I
a
don't
range,
know how much
price
square
range
foot of area that we need to.
based on
I
experience?
don't
or-
have it
Yeah, so-
on, I don't have it price per square foot, no, I'm gonna tell you that right now.
But, you know, if we could find out what the club got offered
Yeah, no,
on
I understand.
both methods.
Yeah,
I do
no,
know.
I mean,
That's a
I
simple
understand that, but we
comparison.
need to know how much
Yeah.
area that we're gonna.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, we don't, it's
But
hard
that's
to
it,
tell,
we
but we
don't
know
Yeah.
what, they're both methods, there was one estimate for the club for the solarization and there was one for.
Yeah, no, I know that, I just don't know the area. for
Well, and I'm
prices.
guessing, Autumn, that you can't really give us a price per square foot
Until you know
until we
that.
pointed out, well, this is the area that needs to be
Yeah,
done, and
they
then
don't
you look to
really
see how
have that
difficult is it,
at
how
this time.
accessible is it,
Right.
time consuming and so on.
Right.
She can't just give us a.
Yeah, the labor
No,
costs
I
are,
know,
you
but,
know, the labor costs will have a great, like the
Yeah,
rocks,
exactly.
working on rocks is obviously gonna be a whole lot more expensive than working on a flat field.
Right.
You know,
And if you have to work into water, that's another.
yeah, that's another, you know, it's, you can't make up a number.
Well, it's good to know that we've had this option in the
Yes,
future.
absolutely, absolutely. It'd be interesting
What?
to follow Calvert Cliffs, what's going on there. how
Yeah.
that goes.
Yeah,
Like I said, that's by far the biggest one we've done. It's very different than the other smaller isolated patches where there was good native seeds around to disperse into the area, so I'm interested to see. We did get grant funding to replant some of that, but certainly not at a normal density. It's gonna be very sparse, so we're hoping for some natural regeneration too, but that'll be, that one would be very different than most of your sites, I think, but.
Do you have a website?
Yes, it's ecohavenllc.com. I have cards.
and when I walk down, the red trail, the Calvert Cliffs, with the Phragmites under, gone, under tarps, it's shocking, but also you see the water
Yes,
right
yeah.
away. I mean, the first time I walked down, I didn't know it was happening, and I just kind of stumbled upon it, and it's a little.
We had that one experience on our community beach on the Drum Point Lakeside where it was sprayed and it was very successful, it was gone. And then the neighbor complained that it looked like the lake was eroding and what she was just seeing is the natural coastline after the
After
Phragmites,
Phragmites
which
was
had
gone.
gone into the water, had removed.
Mhm.
So I think it's so insidious because it creeps in and
Right.
Yeah.
you can lose feet for a year and then you realize it.
well, and a lot of people not knowing what it really is,
Right.
think you're killing off the,
Oh, they think it's pretty, that's the trouble, it's pretty.
Right, well,
Yeah,
yeah,
it-
you guys can let me know once you decide. We're pretty booked up for this coming season anyway, but it sounds like you're looking a little long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, with us, I think it's a
Long-
it's a
long-term,
long-term
yeah.
problem. Because I think short-term, we've more or less come to grips with it.
Yeah.
But long-term, and it will be back. I'm
Okay.
sure as God made little green apples, it'll be back.
Yeah,
But, it's the question of-
Where are you located physically? Here.
We don't have a physical office,
Okay.
but my, you know, do all the work out of my home and then wherever the project sites are.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, we've done some projects in southern Anne Arundel and then down here in Calvert. So.
Okay.
Commissioner in Calvert County?
Yes.
Okay, well, thanks for
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
guys
Thanks
for
for
having me.
joining
Thanks,
us.
Jenny.
Take
I
care.
appreciate it.
Appreciate your visit.
educating us.
No problem. Have the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Hold up, pretend I enjoy it.
Take 10 minutes.
No, she's six weeks old.
weeks.
Take care.
Thank you, thanks, Jenny.
Thank
See you
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's right.
Probably 6 weeks old.
6 weeks old, yeah. Loud wail at one end, total lack of responsibility at the other. Okay. And full of something in the middle.
So we kind of said this while she was here, but what would keep us from doing this ourselves? Like if we had a
Well,
little
it's,
area.
it's labor intensive.
No, it's
Well,
expensive, it's
but I'm-
expensive.
I understand that, but I mean, if we just had a little
Yeah,
small
yeah, you could
spot
you
down
could-
there,
Oh, you
Sure.
could,
you know,
could.
small.
You could.
And we could
You
think
could, you
of,
certainly could.
Sure.
Yeah,
just to
yeah,
see
yeah.
how it
You
works.
could do it, yeah.
before we-
Certainly.
And the cost is considerable, you
Yeah,
know.
the
I
block-
know the
that's why I
cost
said
that
that.
they gave to the club and what Mark, I mean, there were orders of,
Who's it?
not just a lot more, orders of magnitude.
Yeah, it was
Shocking.
into thousands, wasn't it?
It was
Well-
33,000 to the club and 1,200 for Mark Smith,
For the same area.
for the same area. That's a lot.
Yeah.
But they had the worst case of
They did.
density.
But the club has done nothing,
The club
Well,
said that they
that's-
would do it
yeah.
themselves, the club said they would do it themselves, they cut it down.
Yeah.
and they've done
They've
nothing in
done
the
nothing,
meantime. But you see, that they can't do the spraying themselves, because I don't think they can get
They
those
can't.
state-approved chemicals themselves.
Who, you mean the club?
Yeah.
No, they weren't gonna do that, they were gonna put the tarp, they were gonna cut it down and
And
put the tarp on,
down.
yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
they were gonna do this themselves.
Yes.
The club wouldn't spray anyway at all.
I don't,
Would
there
they?
were
That's
people
not
there that
even-
really objected
No,
to it.
that was, so that wasn't even an option, so that's why they
Really
entertained
objected to
Autumn, she
spray.
gave them,
Uh-huh.
and it was just, it was something they couldn't afford. I mean, it was just, too
Right.
much, so. I was hoping that, you know, there's a stand at the club along with the Tuxton that is small enough that if she could have gotten some sort of grant for them, that would be really a good demo area.
Right.
And I wonder why, I guess she said they didn't put in for a grant or something, like.
It's a
Yeah,
private,
they-
they were told it would be difficult because it's a private club.
It's very difficult to get this grant.
Well, if Maryland is so hell-bent on getting rid of it, what
One would
difference
think,
does it make?
one would think,
You
yes.
know, you gotta get rid of it.
Right.
One would think the state would be a little more forthcoming.
One would think.
Yeah, so, and I guess it's illegal or not, so,
Yeah.
probably Tim Hansen that she was dealing with, I think.
Well, we had a similar thing at the yacht club where we were looking at, trying to preserve part of the shoreline there, looking at a grant, and they basically said, there's no way. So it's a private, small private club that's not open to the public and doesn't have, you know, a widespread membership, you're not gonna get it.
And I was told unless you're 501(c),
Well, that's what she was saying, you
Right.
said, we're
Yeah.
501.
you have to be a C3 to get some of these grants.
C
And this has
four,
been
we're
years
C4.
ago where I went to a seminar
Mhm.
trying to get some grants for something, I don't remember for what
Yeah.
now.
Right.
And I asked a question and the woman that was giving us the talk said, you know, what are you? And I told her and she said, well, you may as well. She didn't put it like
Yeah.
that, you may as well forget it.
Yeah.
Don't waste your
Yeah,
time.
well, that's basically
Mhm.
what she really was saying.
Mhm.
You have to be nonprofit, not,
Mm.
I guess
Mhm.
that's the difference.
Well, it could be.
Yeah,
It depends on what do they know what they're even saying?
well, that's
In
true.
a lot of cases, they don't.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
But you know, we do have a neighbor that has taken the problem in their own hand.
Yeah.
Just mows it
Then
down.
we would load it.
Then we would just-
And she keeps mowing it. and
Her
mowing it.
landscapers come in and they just mow it, you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
But I don't think the native plants can come in and,
No, because they mow those too.
yeah.
Well,
And she's got-
the solution is, when we get the lot over here, we'll
Yeah.
put a fence around it and get a herd of goats. And
Yeah,
then
there
take
you
the
go.
goats out.
There you go.
Linda, yeah.
Actually,
Yes,
That too is actually quite
that would work,
expensive.
yeah.
Running
The
those
round
goats,
goats,
yeah, you
yeah.
can rent them.
You can't rent a
That's
goat.
what I've heard.
Yeah, but renting a goat is very expensive.
That's what I just said,
That's
yeah,
what you
exactly,
said.
yeah.
But, you know.
Okay,
All right, guys, I'm gonna split.
Well,
You'll enjoy
I
it.
hope we have a good day.
Well, your
next
Paul's
year.
gonna cook, so you know it's
What's he
gonna be
making?
good.
We'll all come over.
Well, no, some piece of beef.
Oh, okay.
Some dead animal.
All right.
No vegetarian in that house.
Check my teeth, or the ones that are left.
Okay, well, I don't have any remarks really other than to say that, thank everybody for pitching in while I was screwing off for 2.5 weeks. Yeah, right. So I don't really have any other remarks, so why don't we just jump into office, I think.
Recall the last meeting, we talked about the ADA guidelines and so on in the beach, so I did forward those to Shirley Bean, who oversees the group there. And then per suggestion from a property owner, I also posted a link to the actual ADA website,
Okay.
which I thought made sense. Just real quickly, mosquito control doubled this year, what it was last year,
Gosh.
for the cost. Last year was $492.07, $905.15.
It's just inflation of the chemical?
No, I think they were through more often. There were more mosquitoes. They
Oh.
came through and did more spraying this year.
So the weather, some.
Because the price was the same as last year. I checked the price.
Oh,
We had a lot of rain too, so.
Okay, that would, yes,
Yeah.
a lot of breeding grounds, yeah.
That's just another one of those costs you can't predict
well,
for the
right,
budget.
yeah.
But this is the county, right?
This is the county that does it, and
But
we
we
pay
pay
for
them,
it.
yeah.
We pay them for it. They spent 808 minutes last year, 1,617 this year. So
Okay,
don't-
so
don't- But I just was surprised that it was so much more.
well,
Yeah.
I didn't have any mosquitoes, so I guess.
Well, there you go.
I know.
There you go. I don't know if everybody had heard there had been a fatal accident on Beretta Boulevard, but we didn't have to go. And after that, I had 2 emails from 2 different people that live, like at one of the intersections, and wanted to know why we couldn't do speed bumps along Beretta. And I explained county maintained road and so on. And one woman did actually contact the county to make that suggestion.
Where
anything
on
will come of it.
Beretta was it?
I think it was, I think it
Chestnut,
was at
it's around here, Chestnut,
yeah.
yeah.
Where?
They're-
Very
Chestnut.
close.
Oh,
Just right, not too far down, one of the
Yeah,
first
okay.
intersections.
You can see if you drive down there, there's some flowers and things.
He never stopped.
Was
He went, the
quite
guy
young,
was
wasn't he?
Yeah, if you look at where the sheriff's office has put up the marks, there are no skid marks. There are no skid marks whatsoever. He went from the, north side of the, where he was going the right way towards, Rousby Hall, and all of a sudden he just veered off and went right straight in to the tree. He never hit the brakes.
Oh,
Interesting.
did he ever hurt himself?
He
was a young kid.
He died,
He was
20-something. I thought
18.
he was 18, yeah.
Oh,
I heard, I don't know, this might not be true, but I heard he was visiting a girlfriend that was living in the community and he left and was upset or something.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, the one woman that contacted me is a first responder, and she had talked about speed bumps and said that we needed to do something about the speeders on Rousby, or on Beretta. And I explained, I contacted the sheriff's office when he stepped up patrols and so on. Well, being a first, and not really, I don't think I've had much response from them. Maybe they're here, I don't know. But anyway, she's being a first responder has a lot of contacts in the sheriff's office. So she was going to speak to some of the people she knows and see if she couldn't get them to drive through Trump Point once in a while. And just be a presence here. And I think that would perhaps help if you knew that the cops might pull out from Chestnut while you're speeding along Beretta. Maybe you'd be less active.
They used to sit up there by the gate.
I know, but
Yeah, forever.
I know, because all they would do, to my understanding, was write a ticket for rolling the stop sign here
Yeah,
on Beretta
yeah.
and Dogwood.
Yeah.
Now-
for speeding.
Not that I'm aware of. I've heard so many people complain about that. And, well, one should not roll a stop sign.
Mhm.
I'm not saying one should, but you can see all the way up Beretta from
Yeah.
the stop signs. There's really, anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
so.
We had a lot of speed bumps in Silver Spring. I didn't particularly like them, but they did make people slow down.
They also slow down ambulances and stuff. I
They
guess
do, and
that's- I
ambulance
guess that's,
drivers,
is that the
although this is
argument?
a first responder who's saying
Oh,
we
yeah,
gotta have them,
yeah,
so.
I mean, I
But
think.
that
we
is
should.
always the argument against them, school
Yeah.
bus drivers, ambulances, and so on, so.
Buses.
So, okay, on to this. I'm starting to I'm not gonna file any claims on people for non-payment before Christmas, but I'm doing the prep work, and that's what I was complaining about, because I need to do this one form that I can't seem to get on the website to do. So I won't bore you with it. But anyway, that's gonna get started up again. Actual claims, not just attaching them to, not just pretend claims, but actual claims filed. That's what I'm doing. Worked quite well. So 400 Lake Drive, on the lot across the street, that hasn't closed yet, but I did get an email from Tom Pelagotti's office asking me for contact information for Velma Hawkins, the owner, because apparently there is another name on that deed, on the property, and that person has passed away.
Oh.
So, well, they just need the death certificate, which can be done. There just might be a delay in it. So. And I almost forgot to mention this, I don't know if it should be here or roads, but you know, with the snow, or the wind last month, we talked about blocking off the causeways and so on. So I got some prices, and I looked at various options. You can look through this book if you want. The pink pages are where I've talked with Joe Bateman and also with Sal LaCasa to see which they think is the best option. And there are these bars that you can get, and they expand up to 10 feet, and then they hook to a cone, traffic cone. So they're easy to store, you know, don't take up much room. And they also, you can order weights to weight them down a little more than otherwise. So then that versus just cones across the causeway, or barricades, which are more expensive. And then also we talked about signage above the causeways. These are also weighted, and you can add more weight to them by filling them with sand or water. And then there are inserts that go into these signs, so you can write on them, erase it, and so on. But for all of that, $1,518, including freight and tax. I don't know what.
That's for some of each, or what?
That would be 4 signs, so on either side of the 2 causeways that can flood, and 8 systems, because you, 4 systems of these, so 1 on either side of the causeway.
We have 2 causeways?
No, the 2 that flood, we have 5, but the Bay Drive and the River View, are the 2 that are likely to flood. So I don't know how much you're looking to spend.
Like I said, if you're gonna put up these, especially on the Bay Drive causeway, you're going to have to put the caution things up on
Yes.
Lake
Yes,
and Lake Place.
absolutely.
And, you know, those bars, you can't put the bars up on there. You can only put caution that, you know, the causeway is obstructed
Right.
because people living there, and the same on the other side.
Yes,
So
and the same
where
holds true for
where are you
Riverview.
gonna put the bars up?
At the causeway is what I would imagine.
But
So you put the signage above.
And well, and
Close to
how
the
how
traffic.
many people read the signs? So then somebody comes down, and then there's a bar, how do they back up and get back out of it?
The same way they back up if it's flooded.
Yeah. What would they do, what would you do without a barricade there, and they get down there and think, oh, I can make it, and then they float off into the bay?
Well,
I
then
mean,
that's
That's our liability.
That's being stupid, but, you know, I'm saying, you know, like, you've
True.
gotta, you know, like, if you're putting up a warning,
Mhm.
you know, like, right at that thing, you know, like, big warning, you know, causeway, you know,
Right.
flooded or whatever, then, you know, people would probably, well, turn around, or people who live
Right.
there are gonna have, you know, are gonna have to go down there, but, all right, well, if you wanna put the barriers up there, fine. I mean,
Well, I'm not following you.
No,
I mean, you wouldn't put
Well-
barriers above, because
no,
people
no,
who
I'm
live
saying
there
if you put the
could.
barriers right there
Right.
at the thing,
Right,
all right, well then, all right.
they'll
Okay,
have to back out, or at your side of the causeway, they could back out into that parking area and go. Right, they could, and there's a parking area there by Marjorie Sanguinetti's house across from it.
yeah, but, yeah, well,
I mean, I don't know what else to say.
yeah, but
I don't know
I'm
what
just
else.
saying that, you know, backing out from the upper part,
Well, you could.
you know, like,
Well, that's
you're
why the warning signs
you're
are
going in,
there, so
you're going into what
Go to Carolyn Evil's driveway.
Yeah,
And then they could back into there.
you're putting the barrier up right by that, that house right there, that White House on the thing. So people come down, they're gonna have to back up and they're gonna have to go up on that, what's his name, is Kermit's
think of that in a
property.
Herman's yard at that
Well, I was
And
thinking,
then-
Amy Rispin
and
has that house right at the bottom, so it would be below Amy's house, and you put the,
Yeah,
Yeah, it'd be below the,
Amy's house and then
but Amy's house.
is right on the,
Right,
on the
Yeah.
causeway.
right, she
So
said
if
she'd be,
you come down
no, it's
there,
not, it's above the causeway.
yeah, this is.
So you would put the barriers down
Mhm.
below
Yeah.
the last houses on
Right.
each side.
Yeah.
oh, the last, all right,
Yeah, so
if you
you
do
just-
that,
And then
Just
put the
put
warning
the-
signs above it saying,
oh, if you put it
road
on,
closed
right, so
ahead.
not at,
high
not
water.
at the, right at the thing, you're doing, you're putting up the,
Well,
at the
the only
last
issue
house.
is you don't wanna block somebody off from getting into their own place.
Okay, so, all right, no, well, I mean, that, now that I understand, I was thinking you were putting that barrier right at the causeway.
we are.
Well,
Well,
No,
sort of, it's
He's
kind of,
saying you're
yeah.
now gonna move that, you're gonna move that
Well, this-
barrier
what
up
does it-
to the driveway of Amy's house.
Oh, well, I suppose so.
And so that way,
Could.
when they,
Yeah,
when
yeah, I
they
suppose
come
so.
there, they
Yeah.
see that, and
Oh, well,
then they
okay.
Yeah,
can
that
pull
makes
into
sense, yeah.
Amy's
Yes,
and turn around.
that
And then-
makes sense,
Yes,
yes.
that
I see
makes
what you're
sense. See,
saying.
now, if you move it to where people are able to turn around, then I'm okay with it. I was thinking you were gonna put it right at the causeway.
That's what I was thinking, but yeah,
And-
sure, we could put it at the driveway, the last
There's
driveway.
the- yeah.
Okay, and now I quite understand it
And
now.
that's
I
where it was
Yeah.
when there was a sign, it was up.
Yeah.
There, because we drove around and we stopped and
Yeah.
walked down, but it was where it should be.
That barrier is 10 feet, so that's one lane, so a car can get around it, unless you
Put in the middle,
straddle.
or put in the middle.
No, but I think she said that it expands
It's,
out.
It's,
Why can't we put it right at,
Spans from,
right
up
at
to 10
Lake
feet.
Drive, above it?
Well,
And
but because Amy
I just
Rispin
had
and
the-
Carolyn Evil
then you're-
and that other
It's a
person.
one-lane barrier,
Oh, I see.
and then you include the sign there, says causeway flooded, local traffic only. I see those all the time when I'm driving around.
Well,
Well,
but
you-
wouldn't one put that barrier, you wouldn't put it off to one side, wouldn't you put it right in the middle and have
That's what I
5
would
feet
do.
on either side where you couldn't get a car around?
That's what
I mean,
That's what I
if you
would
put
do.
it in
Yeah,
the middle.
If it's
That's
really
what I would do.
flooded and you're risking.
And
yeah,
all,
you don't
also,
want to-
is it
I don't think
illuminated
I
at
wanna-
night?
It's hard to back up
They're
from
reflective,
that causeway,
they are reflective.
back up to
Okay.
Lake.
But they,
Well,
but
which
you
is
Yeah, that's
usually
why I
put
say-
a warning
Point,
sign up
put it at
ahead
the
of
driveway.
it, so
You
you
put
have
the
a
warning sign
warning that
at
it's
Lake-
flooded, so you
That's
don't drive down
So
there.
Lake
That's
Drive
the-
and Lake Place would be the warning sign, and then the
Yes.
barrier would be a little further down,
Could be.
Yeah,
like right below Amy Rispin's
yeah.
driveway.
Right
So she
below.
could still get out.
Yeah, she could still get
Carol
into
Evil
her
could
thing,
get out,
but
and the
not,
other person, I don't know who that is, that was
Okay.
there, whoever
Aren't you
they
saying
are.
when it-
Hey, where would you put it on Riverview?
Well, I'd have
At
to,
the Kurtz's?
yeah, where would you put it on the?
no, the barrier, no, because people live below that.
No, not in Kurtz's.
You only
Yeah,
need
they
one,
was on the other
you
side.
only need one from Riverview because it's only one way.
This is true, but people,
Mhm.
to Jim's point, are stupid.
Um,
And they'll think, well, I couldn't get that way, I'll go this way. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm trying to think of liability. Well, why didn't you block off both sides of the causeway? Look, now the
Yeah.
car's floated
I
away.
think it's better.
Yeah,
But when you come down Riverview to the causeway, there are houses right there on the water.
Yes, but you can get to those houses from the other way.
You can, but again, I think we need to block it, put the warning there. So you're saying what, where would the
I'm saying
barrier
it right just below the Kurtz's, so if they stop, they'd have some place to back up and turn around.
But then you're keeping these people from easily getting to their houses. I don't know.
No, they could go around the other way.
They could,
Not-
that's true, they could go
They're
down
not
and
blocked
sash
off.
those
Those
so
houses.
you,
houses are not blocked
you
off.
just alert them that that's what
That's
you're
it.
doing, so they understand.
True. True. So, I guess my only question, I didn't think of all these things. Is,
Well, hopefully,
and I did,
hopefully we won't have to deal with it anytime soon.
I know, I agree. And I did actually go online and look at Uline, which is another provider of this kind of thing. And for the most part, they're more expensive, like for the barriers and the cones, they were coming up more expensively. For the sign, I couldn't quite do apples to apples. So I kind of stopped, because I can't tell you how many quotes I have here. So, yeah, for all of that, it was 15, 18.
What
To
is
me, that
it?
doesn't seem unreasonable.
No, it
You're
doesn't.
right.
Are they custom signs or
You gotta,
you just?
These are not custom signs, you can take a look at that.
the standard signs, probably warning signs that you would,
That A-frame thing at the top left on the
Yeah.
corner.
for some people,
But if we wanted to
comes
have a
with-
warning,
Well, it comes with inserts that will slide in and out.
so you could have those
And then-
tailored maybe.
Well, no,
Or they
you
come- they
can,
have-
but they're
they
more
have- They have
expensive.
them already.
And they also come with letters that you
Oh,
can arrange.
wow.
But the least expensive was to do a black marker board kit. So
Oh.
then, just like those
Okay.
slipshod ones we have, which I think we should keep,
Yes.
you would dry erase it. It's less expensive that way.
No, that sounds good.
So has that attorney said that we are definitely liable if someone drives through the water and it's,
Well, we've not consulted an attorney, but we do maintain the causeways, and I know years and years and years ago now, at the beach, community beach, kid coming down around Beach Drive, into the beach entrance, the gate was closed, the fence was across, it was dusk. He did head over, right into the fence, had to be air backed out, and we got sued. Not a tremendous amount, not for negligence really,
But
but it had medical costs, and our attorney said, you need to mark that so that people are aware,
Mm.
you know, that that's,
No,
But I think it's the right thing to do, for the community.
Yeah.
It's not that much money, and it seems to be the right thing to do. And if we don't get it exactly right, we'll figure that out. Where the placement of it.
where the
you know?
placement is,
That's what I
yeah,
mean.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those are good points, I wasn't
Yeah.
following what
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
said, but those are
and
good
I,
points.
and you know, and I was just thinking of, oh, well, you just put it right at the causeway.
Right,
Well,
right, yeah,
But at the time you come
Yeah,
down that
yeah, you
little,
can't get, it's
you
hard
come
to
that
get
little
back.
circle, it's like,
I know.
whoa,
Right.
and
Yeah,
then,
yeah, yeah.
all right, now
So-
how do I get around? And, you know, when they're doing work on, you know, like on the causeway or whatever,
Right,
they'll put a sign up
Right.
at Bayview saying, you know,
Right.
like, work, warning, work,
Right.
and, you know, so you,
Right.
you don't go down
Mhm.
that little
Right.
section, because,
right,
I mean, that is dangerous to begin with, when you come around,
yeah,
you know.
and I think we should keep the ones that we have in the shed,
Oh, yeah.
because those get put out when we're doing rejuvenation, and they get messed
Yeah.
up and dirty and filthy, and,
Mhm.
yeah, maybe we'll never need them, but wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, so do we need a motion to spend that kind of money? Whatever, but,
I don't think so.
it fits,
okay,
so.
Any objections?
all right, that's it.
Hmm?
That's it.
That's it?
Oh, wait a minute,
Now you can talk about roads.
Oh, okay, well, that's another one. It's been a busy month. Very quickly, pre-drive, driveway was finished by Grover's, cost $850. That was that interface of the driveway and the road. Community Beach, from the cleanup, Grover's, completed that, $16.95. Mike noticed a small pile of asphalt still there. Mike Toro said he'd be back to get that. I don't know if he's done it yet.
that too, yeah.
I don't know if he's done that yet. Bay Drive Causeway, Carl Bowen cleaned that up, $700. The footbridge drainage was completed, Carl Bowen, $300. And then Joe Bateman came in at Carl's suggestion and placed some sand and little rocks. I can't think what those are called. Well, anyway, because it had washed out just a little bit, so that was done. Erosion at the Bay Causeway. Carl Bowen's going to give us a price on that, and I also contacted Ward's Marine, and they'll be looking at that as well.
Where is the erosion exactly?
Well,
Same place. Mike's
You know where the Kerwin
Oh, Kerman
Yeah,
property?
where that property
Oh, where
ends,
that tree
where-
is just,
Yeah,
oh, yeah, I
it's
do
in
remember
the
you
road, so,
talking.
yeah.
You're
they
talking
put in the long stretch of riprap on the
Yeah,
Kerwin
yeah,
property.
yeah.
Then there's,
about-
then there was a couple trees, scrub trees,
Yeah.
and then, and a curve, and then there were a bunch of well rings below it.
Yes, I
And then,
remember.
and then the riprap for the causeway starts.
Yeah.
Okay, well that whole area where those trees are is completely eroded
Washed
away,
out.
Yeah,
We're
I saw it, I went down.
hanging by the roots,
I saw it, it really is kind
and we had there's
of
a
shocking.
pretty good sized section of the actual shoreline that fell in, really, and from the wave action. So, what Carl's propose, and I agree, is the only way to really stop this is to go ahead and complete the riprap from the Kerman property to the causeway, fill in that area that eroded. Don't worry about the well rings and stuff, just leave those there, but bring in some big riprap to do that.
I think it's really necessary because it's getting closer and closer to the
Yeah,
road.
it's
and
getting
It's
closer
gonna
to the road.
undercut the road if we
I
don't
mean,
do
it's in-
something.
15 years ago, there was a nice path down,
Yeah.
when we thought it was
Public
our
access.
property, and it really wasn't, but,
Right.
I mean, there was, and that got whacked for a couple of times.
Right. So, but Carl said we need to have DNR look at it, and start the, thinking about the permitting process. Probably have to get permits for the trees from Robin, once they.
Carl was saying that when DNR does it, they do the whole thing.
Well, then maybe we'll,
Oh.
we'll find out. Carl and I are meeting tomorrow, 10 o'clock with DNR down there to look at it, and we will, get their opinions and find out what we have to do. And then, also, I'm gonna have them look at the pond, the lake, down by the parking area, because that looks like that's starting to, I don't think it's like storm erosion, I think it's just, the water's just starting to eat into it's just kind of like the Drum Point Lake.
Right.
You get rid of the vegetation, so now the water just goes in there and chews away at the bank.
Yeah.
So we thought probably just a row of rock along there to stop it. But we're gonna have DNR look at that too while we're there. And then like Rhea said, I told Carl for something this size, we're probably looking at least $20,000 to do this. We need to get another bid. So we'll try to get Jan here.
He's gonna try to get there tomorrow. She said she's gonna call or whatever when they're on the
Right.
way.
A lot of people in the community are grumbling about the shoulders from the
Yes,
asphalt.
they are.
right now.
That was, that's true, yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
I
yeah,
explained
well, I was gonna talk about that too.
the need, I explained to one property owner the need for that and suggested she drive up Lake Drive because that was done just last year and it's near pre-paving appearance now. I mean, it comes back. If we don't do it, then the shoulder of the road or the edge, whatever the asphalt's just bare and we're gonna undermine it,
And well, my point is, it's not on your property.
True.
So, I mean, and it's because you go walk your dog, look at the road, don't look. and-
Well, one person that complained, and a little bit of a legitimate, I understand what she was saying, is that with the rocks, some of them are now out onto the pavement a little bit, just because that's what happens. And kids on bikes will go further out into the street. And, yes, this is true.
Yeah, the sky could fall in tomorrow.
Well, one doesn't want to say these things, but yes, that is a hazard if your kids are riding their bikes in the street. You know, it's not a community with sidewalks.
No.
Like some are, this is an old community,
Right.
and that is the hazard.
And if you have a heavy rain, sometimes the rocks
It kind of
wash
washes
up.
back.
Sure,
Mhm.
but yeah, I did get some complaints.
Well, I had another call tonight, just
Oh,
before
did
the
you?
meeting, and from somebody on Overlook, on the upper part of Overlook,
So
complaining
toward
about.
Riverview, that direction?
No, on the top part, on the upper part above
Oh, River, I'm sorry.
Overlook,
Toward the club. Toward
towards
the
the
club
club,
then, okay,
on the upper part towards the club.
okay.
Complaining about it, and I reminded her that we've always done it,
Yep.
because it's done to create a slope up to the road surface and to protect the edge of the road surface,
Right,
etc. So she probably didn't realize that, but it's also on the right of way, for the most part. Now, there are a few places maybe where,
well, right,
depending on if, they might, like, some of the unpaved driveways, they also slope that down there to protect the edge. And they may think that they own that,
right.
but I reminded her that it's for the most part, it's in the right of way. But what I did notice, well, two things. In the past, most of the time, I would see that edge be maybe a foot or so wide. There are areas on Riverview and other places where it's 3 foot wide.
Oh, really?
And that was where she was complaining, was that this was encroaching, was much wider. So,
I can ask Chris about that.
Well,
I don't
you
know.
can ask Chris, and also if, it appeared to me, in doing some writing around, that there did seem to be a little more sloppy, rocks and stuff, debris left on the roadway. So,
Okay,
but I'm gonna go overlook myself tomorrow
okay.
and see if I think there's an issue, but we need to have, and I can get back to you, because we need, if we think there is, then we need to have Chris address it with them.
Right. Well, he is going to address, I had, let me cross that off. I had also a complaint, about the stones, this one woman on Riverview, but also she said that her driveway was marked up, and they had just had that sealed. So Chris looked at it, and he's going to talk to Great Mills about that. So I can mention this to him as well, that some of these areas are 3 feet in width. I don't know if, like with the shoulder backup, I don't know if it depends. I mean, it seems to me the higher the asphalt maybe, the further out you have
Oh,
to go
right,
to
yeah,
slope it
Sure,
down.
yeah.
So is Overlook,
I don't know, that's why I have to go
wonder,
look at it.
yeah, okay.
I looked at the Riverview in the lower part of Overlook, from the vantage of my bicycle seat,
Sure,
and I noticed that to some
Okay.
degree. Now, I didn't notice enough rocks to where it caused a problem.
okay.
I was so thankful that the S-curves were finally paved,
I
and I
know.
wasn't going into potholes.
Oh, yeah,
that,
Yeah.
right,
um,
right. So,
Okay.
all right, well, I'll wait to hear from you tomorrow, and then I'll ask
Yeah,
Chris.
I'm gonna go swing by there and look at it after we meet with DNR down at the crossing.
Okay.
Speaking of causeways, has anybody recently looked at the Riverview Causeway? Because there's like a channel that looks like it's cut out from the lake. And it goes right to the edge of the road. When I stopped and looked, I thought it was going under the road.
So there's a culvert,
There is a call.
there's actually a drain, it's kind of an interesting drain, it's not a straight culvert, there's actually like a collection box where the lake drops down into it, and then the culvert goes out to the bay. And
Yeah,
I've looked at it a few times, just to make sure it looks like it's still flowing, and it does.
I'm just worried about, I thought that the roadway might, start saying,
Well, there is one area there that Joe had noticed, Joe Bateman, and he had Sal take a look at it. And I can't quite recall the outcome, except I think Chris looked at it then beyond that. And it wasn't anything that was going to be an issue immediately, but there's like a little patch job that does need to take place, I think near that culvert. But I'll have to check my file, I don't remember exactly what that was, but I'll make a note and
Okay.
talk to Joe about that, or Chris. The only other thing, well, the well rings, Mike Taro from Grover's is still apparently waiting for the lowest tide that he can find with it's a decent weather day to get in there and start doing the repair of those. And then minor, there was a tree down at at Deer Drive and Rousby Hall Road yesterday. I got a call from Mary Ann McGowan, somebody from I guess 911, sheriff's office was contacted. They contacted the county. They were told, no, that's not a county road. So then they called Mary Ann McGowan, thinking Drum Point Club. She called me, I called the number back. Anyway, Joe Bateman actually took care of it. It was rather small and was not completely blocking the road, which is maybe why the fire department didn't take it out, because they usually clear the roads, but it wasn't completely.
So it was on Deer Drive,
It was on Deer Drive at Rousby Hall.
well, Rousby Hall though, if it was on Rousby, it's a state
It's
problem.
on Deer. It was
But
on
it was
Deer.
actually on Deer.
It was on Deer, yeah. And that's it.
Okay. Anything else? And now that we've spent all of Jeff's money,
speaking of that, I mean, we're in really good shape. We haven't paid Great Mills yet, but.
No,
But looking at the profit and loss, we're really right on track, where we should be this time of year. So really no surprises, nothing outstanding, nothing really to point to, really, just all as expected. There are some changes though in the balance sheet. We, this month has added the boat ramp to our assets
Oh,
for all these years. And was appraised the boat ramp at
We
$25,000.
might wanna get a more expert.
Who
Maybe
raised it?
Jamie
I don't know, I think
came up with.
that's what it would cost if we were gonna build one.
at least.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it's, you look at the reserve study, remember, over the course of a few years, and it came up to around 20-something, but that reserve study's pretty old. Shall I ask
The
Jamie?
dock itself would probably be $20,000 to $25,000.
Oh, well, perhaps so.
And then not to mention,
So would Jamie be able to give us a price on the boat ramp? Just, you know,
well,
for
he could
these
give,
purposes.
yeah, I mean, he could
just
give
for these
you a
purposes.
replacement cost
Yeah,
for the,
well, that's for sure.
for the dock at least, you know,
Yeah.
the ramp, I don't know how to estimate that. Pavement or something like
Right.
So our balance sheet will be more up to date from now on. And then you remember at the last general membership meeting, I forget her name, asked for,
Maria Miller.
Marie Miller asked for breakdown of administrative costs by account. And so we have done that. I know, it's very generous with the administrative. I had to go back and look line by line, because it shows a mandatory assessment, administrative cost of 44%. And I just don't feel that we spend that much, but if you count every little thing, or
Well, I
some
just-
things that really aren't
what it is.
administrative.
But most of our admin though is under that
Yeah,
Yeah,
account,
It
right?
is.
So
it is.
you're talking,
very little under the special tax district,
Right.
1%.
right,
Administrative covenant fees, 22%. So, anyway, we've got the answer now by account over a period of time over the last 5 years. So,
And
should answer the
the
question.
reason I want, like, I'll send it to everybody, but I wanted to know, does that look like what I think it looks like?
Mhm.
Is it as clear as, okay, good. All right. I think it was an important, 2017 up here, thing to respond to. I mean, it was a legitimate question from Maria. How much are we spending on admin versus the roads and so on? And she's in particular always been concerned about high cost of admin.
Yes, I wasn't her question, how much of the roads allocation is actually spent on roads?
Yes, exactly,
Yes.
right, yeah,
Mhm.
right.
And is it still 100%, as what Tony said?
Well, there's administrative costs to managing the roads. I mean, you can look at it like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you don't manage the roads and not pay for that.
Yes.
So you could look
But
at it
this-
that way.
yeah, but this basically,
When I added all the money up, it was under 18% on administrative costs, I think. Is that what I said in the email to you guys? I think under 18%. When I added all together, all the money we have, admin versus capital and
right,
operations and maintenance. I
Mhm.
think it was 18%, yeah.
yeah, so when you look at the, I mean, basically what this says, think of STD as being mostly roads.
Right.
And that says that we have a very low administrative cost burden on that. Most of our administrative burdens, people tender, mandatory assessments, and some on covenant.
Right, yeah, and her concern was years and years ago, before we did this, change to the fee structure, and it was just a $10 per year covenant fee that was mandatory. Many people interpreted the covenants to say all of that $10 had to be spent on the roads, like with
Right.
whatever, mixed or Philipopper or whatever. And then as things began to change, and we changed the fee structure and so on, it was decided that, like we just said, administrative costs, you know, and Gary and I separately did a little survey of my time, and it was easily 65% of what I do is spent on roads, specifically roads. So I think that anybody would be pleased to look at those covenant fees, which are supposed to go to the roads, 78% of it does. So, plus the administrative cost. So I don't know how else to respond to that question.
Yeah, and you have to look at the, and I can't read it myself, you have to look at the scale on here too. Because the scale, I mean, if you just look at the scale and you look at these and you say, well, these are all sort of equal and we're spending most of our admin here. Well, no, they're not equal. This is a big chunk of our money
Right,
and we're spending very little on admin.
exactly, yeah.
These are smaller pots of money and we're spending percentage-wise more than admin on those.
Right,
But,
right. All right,
so are we gonna present that at the,
well, I think you should,
Yeah.
just because it was a question that she raised.
There's no reason not to.
no.
But with Mike's caveat of the display of this and
Right. Yeah,
understanding that the scale is different.
Right.
Well,
Um,
look at Mike, Mike's gonna, you're gonna be the
Yeah,
one to present, am I right? I mean, oh.
where?
It's the finger.
I'm just saying, I assume you're gonna talk about the special tax district and erosion, and
Yeah.
so, to me, that would be part of the special tax
Yeah.
district.
I think you, was that the latest copy that you,
Well,
is
it
that
is
what you
except-
emailed to me or did you change?
I changed the fiscal year down here, and then forgot to change it up here.
Okay, well,
Oh,
why don't you
okay.
fix that and then send that to me so
Okay.
we can,
Yeah.
I'll,
I'll do it.
I'll see if I can display that on.
Do you want copies? Oh, you're gonna display it? Okay.
I just have to say, I don't see the point of her question. I mean, admin by account, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, we should look at the whole picture. And, our picture is very good. Can't, I
Well,
just
but-
don't see the problem of
But
looking
it
at admin
stems,
for.
it stems from the change in the interpretation of the covenants. I mean, people were quite unhappy when, some of them, when we started spending covenant money on administrative costs. The whole reason that we switched the STD away from administrative costs, because some of my salary used to come from the STD, as did our supplies and various things. And people complained all the time at the county, oh, their admin costs are too high, too high, too high.
Mhm.
So that's when it was Gary who said, fine, let's get the special assessment, or not special, mandatory assessment. See if we can increase the covenant fee, which we started to do in 15, take it all out of the STD. And that's when that dropped to 3% just for the audit, because that's required. But it all stems from that. Their complaint, her
I
complaint.
understand that, it just doesn't make any sense.
I agree.
I mean, it's the same amount of money out of my pocket every year when I check the drum.
That's true.
Because you still have to do the same work. You
Maybe-
work on that work.
Maybe we ought to have the fourth graph that shows the total
You want me to do that?
and what the the percentage of our total is admin,
We're pretty efficient.
Yeah. and then break it out.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose that makes sense.
And that's all for me.
Okay. Any more on environment?
I have nothing, but I know that, I saw that the newsletter talks about your invasive
Yeah.
work, your ivy
Ivy.
meeting.
I
Yeah,
believe.
we had, our first
So
session,
you're happy.
we had our first session last month, and 5 people showed up. I wasn't by myself, so I was happy about that, and, we went down to Oak, and probably we moved ivy from about 30 trees, I don't know, we weren't counting, but I
How long did it
think
take?
probably about 30.
How long did it take?
That's good.
Most people stayed the full 2 hours, well, everybody did, all 5 of us
You
did.
got all that done in
So, yeah,
Did
so,
you take any pictures?
I did, I took before pictures,
Before and
so,
after?
And the people actually working?
a few of them, yes, and I'll get more, but we're gonna have another one this week.
Those in the newsletter?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah,
Put them on the
I'll-
website.
I'll get some from this week, because we're doing another one on Saturday after the general
After the,
membership
yeah, I
meeting
saw that, yeah.
on Overlook. It's funny, when I was looking for a lot, Rhea gave me all the lots that DPPOA owns. And I thought I was gonna, just find so many lots full of ivy and that were easy accessible. And I went out and I couldn't really find too many. But Southern Calvert Land Trust owns 60 properties here.
Oh.
And Rhea gave me Kurt Larson's number, and I talked to him, and he's okay with us using their lots to clear the ivy, so, we're gonna start doing that as well, because there's a lot
Mhm.
of his lots or their lots that,
They should be grateful.
yeah, oh, they are, so that's the one we're gonna do on Saturday, is one of their lots on Overlook.
This Saturday?
this Saturday, after the membership meeting.
When did
I
you
had
have
to
your
change
last-
the time.
When did you have your last?
It was, I think it's the second Saturday in,
You had
of
it
each
the
month.
13th,
So
I
last
think.
month?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, I was out of town.
And you mentioned, because I was telling you about the one on Overlook, that it's the tree in our right of way, I can't think of the address right now. And you said that's a different type of ivy. So can you
It's a
not,
different vine, I don't know what it is.
so you can't choke
I mean,
out-
I'm sure we still could, we still
Yeah.
could go and do it, but I didn't wanna get out and do it in front of somebody's house. I kinda wanted to talk to
She's
them.
aware of you.
The
She's aware
owner?
of it, yes.
And I wasn't quite sure I was in the right spot,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
so maybe.
I just thought it would give you one that was easily accessible for sure. And
It
it is in
is.
our right of way.
It is, and it was
And also one
covered.
that would be sort of obvious that, and people could see the results from,
Mhm,
you know,
Mhm.
kind of thing.
yeah.
I don't know. I can contact her again and let her know.
And if she wants to call me, maybe I can
Okay.
arrange to, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
and what, it's just, it's not
I
gonna
don't
take a
blame
group
you,
of
yeah.
people, it's just gonna take me with my clippers going up
Okay,
there and
okay.
off the tree.
So I can give her your contact.
That'd be good.
Okay.
So anyway,
Okay. All right, Maggie, do you have anything, any updates on?
Yes, I actually spoke with, Dave Harding, is that his name? And Chris Moody. Chris is in Florida. And, Dave is getting ready to go, so I'm looking to get those two and Gary together up here, just so we can meet and just get kind of a consensus of what the office would actually do if there was some type of catastrophic emergency. Just get a plan of sorts and then take a look at that room back there and just see if we can't get it organized and see if there's any supplies that, you know, that someone might need for rescue or help could get to us. So I'm looking next week, but I haven't heard back from Gary yet. So it might just be Dave, me, and Gary, since Chris is in Florida, so.
Now, there, I assume the county has its own emergency response,
Oh, yeah.
and so, at some point, you'll coordinate, so we know what they do and what they think we might do, and, okay.
And Dave and I think Chris both are certified ham operators, so, you know, they are quite capable of operating our radios, but, yeah, we do need, and see, Peter did all that, he knew,
Right.
you know, all of that stuff, and I haven't talked to him recently to see how he's doing. Has anybody heard from him?
I talked with Gary the other night.
Yeah, I mean, they continue, it's tough, but they found out she's got breast cancer on top of his problems, and they're just,
There is also a county website that we have access to. I don't know if the password will still get us in, we've not used it for a while, I don't know the last time Peter might have checked in on it. And I guess the point of that is, and Dave Hardy will probably know, and Gary, but if for instance, we had a really bad weather event and there was a tree down across, let's say Raspberry Hill Road, blocking access in a major way and so on, we could enter that, it's my understanding, on that website. You know, to alert whoever
Yeah, okay.
might need to be alerted.
So
That's
do
something you'll wanna talk to Gary about, I'm
Do
sure.
we have,
I have the password.
Oh, you do, okay.
You know, again, I don't know if it's still.
Is there a way to check to see if the password's?
Yeah, I can try to sign in and just see, or I can send it to you or whatever.
Yeah, okay.
But after today's mess with the password, I'm like,
yeah.
I'll see if I can sign in.
Yeah, I think it's important that we, you know, get on this as soon as we can, because
Yeah.
we can, you know, sit here and say, oh, it'll never happen, but we can't sit here and say it'll
Yeah.
never happen, especially with where the weather seems to be recently, so.
But I think it's important to understand how we would fit in with the county and what, when and what we would do. And then there's also the aspect of reporting significant things up the chain that eventually get into FEMA,
Exactly.
that may qualify us for FEMA support. Kind of stuff.
Also, the county should know who to call here, so they don't call Mary Ann McCollum.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
yeah.
Must be Hall.
That's true. Oh, well, the woman I spoke with yesterday, she's the actually off-duty, after-hours contact person. I put her in my cell phone and her name, and I gave her my cell phone number with the caveat that it does not go out to anybody. And she said, no, she's the keeper of that file, and they're not allowed to give that information out. So if something were to happen, I guess at 2 in the morning, I'd like to say my phone would ring, but the thing of it is, it doesn't ring after 10 o'clock. So
Oh,
I silence it after 10.
Yeah.
But
But at least the
they have
county
my
has that
number now,
information.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and this phone number as well. So she took all that, she said she's the keeper of the files, so. we'll
And
see.
who's this? This is who, I'm sorry.
I think her name is Emma, I don't know, she's in my cell phone, but she works, I guess, in conjunction with the sheriff's office and 911.
Oh, okay.
She's not one of their, I don't think she's one of their 911 operators,
She's not just-
but she's like a dispatch, yeah, okay, that's a good one. That's right. So, yes.
Well, I have, speaking of that, I'm in the process of getting on with the sheriff's office critical care team as well.
Oh,
So we'll have a link
oh, good, excellent.
to that too.
okay.
That's it.
Okay. Welcome today.
Cindy purchased a bunch of snacks and napkins and all kinds of things, and she's been reimbursed. I assume Jack gave her the checks.
I gave her the check.
All right. Put you on the spot there. And you guys assembled, what, 4 the other day? And we have 7 on hand now.
Yeah, 4, yeah.
And I actually haven't given but maybe 1 or so out in the last week or so, but there are 20 letters out there to newcomers. So,
Did you give my brother a letter?
what's your brother's?
You have a brother that has a house here?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
three of you now.
There's 3 of us here now, yes.
What's your
There
brother's
may be
name?
more coming.
What's your brother's name?
Chuck Melville.
He's received a letter.
Chuck, oh, did he? Okay.
I'm sure that, the name Melville,
Okay.
so yes, he would have gotten a letter within the last week or so. And I have to say, sometimes they slip through the cracks. I just did property transfers back to September 1st, checked them all again, and I was pretty much up to date. But when I was trying to do claims yesterday, I found one property owner who the property, it's a vacant lot, is now owned by some development company. So I'm gonna send them, it wasn't a foreclosure, not that I could find, so I'm gonna send them the statement, and that happened back in July. I check the SDAT, the tax assessment website periodically, and just sometimes, I don't know if it's my dates, I'm just like missing it, but I go back sometimes 6 months, depending on how busy I am. I don't know what happens. So anyway, so somebody might have closed last summer and just now gotten a letter. But he got a letter that means.
Okay,
Okay, planning committee. Just to review, back in the spring, we submitted what we thought was a loan request or application to DNR for a no interest loan. And that went into a black hole, and the guy never, well, he responded once or twice. He said he wanted to come down and do a site visit, and then never again. Never answered my emails or anything, so that kind of went into a black hole. Then, digging into the shoreline conservation stuff, I found information on getting a grant. And we thought, well, we're gonna be doing planning and things like that, as well as trying to just maintain the shoreline. So that, well, maybe that'll work. So I tried, I went to their link, got a form, filled the form out. We submitted all kinds of pictures and plans and diagrams and all kinds of stuff, and sent it, and I told Rhea to send it certified. Okay, so October 22nd, it was signed for at DNR in the mail. Don't know if it ever got to the guy. So I, began to get concerned. I kept trying to call, and I call him, and I get, this number is no longer in service. Well, that's interesting. And then I would start calling other kind of trying to work up the chain. Nobody answered any phones, okay, at DNR. So I finally found an email address for the guy who is like 2 levels above this guy. Who basically, he was the lead of what they call the Chesapeake and Coastal Service, which includes shoreline conservation, remediation, a whole bunch of other stuff in there. And this is where this grant and loan packages and all that kind of stuff were supposed to, the clearinghouse for all that. So I sent him an email and I said, by the way, this guy won't correspond with me, his phone doesn't work, is he still there? I did nicer than that, but
Throwing out the bus all the way.
believe me, he actually answered my email and said, I'll have other people get in touch with you. And lo and behold, 2 of them did. A guy named Wes Gould, a young guy who was in that same section, same department, contacted me. We set up a site visit last week. He came down, looked at the property, says, I think this looks like a good project, etc. We talked about the loan. I said, well, what happened to the applications and stuff? He said, well, I don't know, but I'll go find out. Well, he got back to me, he said, well, one problem with the loan, and he sent me the documentation, which the other guy never had done. It would require, to get this loan package through, would require a petition signed by 75% of the owners in Drum Point.
Poor Deborah.
It would require a completely separate STD with the county. It would require, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we both of us concluded that that's a non-starter. That ain't gonna work. I tried to convince him that we already have an STD, and we were in fact going to make a line item in there, to address this. He said, it doesn't matter, you gotta have a separate one.
If you're gonna get a loan.
Yeah.
If you're gonna help.
I said, well, that's crazy. So
I think they
then,
might make it as difficult as they can, so
Well,
they don't
yeah.
have to get a
So then, the other person that he put me in touch with was a gal named Nicole Carlozo. And I ended up today having a virtual meeting with them on Google version of Zoom. But very good meeting, about 20-25 minutes. We went through the whole application process. They agreed that the grant is the way to go. I said, well, we submitted the grant package in October, what happened to it? She said, I don't know, can't find it. I said, oh, really, okay. And she said, besides that, that's not the way you should do it. There's an online application process. I said, well, I was never told about it. Anyway, so we had a positive meeting, and I went through the package with them so that I understood it. It's a fairly simple thing. In fact, basically all the stuff I submitted before, I think I can just repackage and submit. The one thing that's a little more complicated is there's a kind of a budget package that has to go, and I'll work with Scott and see if we can get that in the format they want. But it has to be done by the 15th, so I'll be working on that to get that done. But it's just, come to find out, the long and short of it is, I kept telling them, what happened to this guy? Did he die or what? No, he's been busy, he's gonna move to NOAA. I said, oh God.
If only somebody would have told you that.
Yeah.
You could have pursued other avenues.
Exactly, or found another, whatever. So, well, Noah's lost.
See what you did there.
Yeah. But I think we're in a position now to make more progress, and I think the grant, and they're both pretty positive about the size of this project. They think it fits within the grant, and the fact that we want to do some cost sharing. So they're pretty positive about it. And I'm pretty positive that there are people that are actually alive and have a pulse.
to actually do their jobs.
Yeah. So that's where we're at on that, and I'll keep you informed. Unfinished business. Well, we've already talked about the lot. STD, we've got a, did we get anything back Lee, from the county?
Other than the meeting will be on the, or the public hearing on the 15th
Or did
of March.
they accepted the 15th?
Well, she needs to declare that through the commissioners, but she was pretty sure that that would be fine.
Okay,
But I've not gotten word that it was actually yes by the commissioners.
okay.
All right, can I just ask the question? If the commissioners don't approve our recommendation for the STD, where does that put us as far as finances? Does that mean that we'll be in a problem for the next 5 years because we're not getting the increase, or can we get some of the funds from the mandatory assessment? I'm just wondering, I'm playing the devil's advocate. What if it's not approved?
I guess we would rework the budget for what they do approve,
Right,
and then figure out.
history says we're gonna have an STD. The question is, what will they accept from our submission?
Okay.
And we've got the budget put together, and we've given them that initial submission. We haven't got any feedback on that yet. But based on their review of that, and then the public hearing, that'll start the process of either accepting it, revising it. I can't see them not giving us an STD, since they're not maintaining our road.
No, I mean, I was assuming that, we'd still get the STD, but not at, maybe at the same,
Well,
at the
maybe-
same level that we have now, like for the next 5 years, but, that I was, that's what I meant.
Based on history, I would say we probably have a really good chance of getting all of the road and operations part of it funded.
Right.
The thing that would probably be the most questionable would be the submission for the beach.
Oh,
So, if they don't approve that, then, we're still, it would be nice if we didn't have to do all this stuff, basically at the same time. If we knew the answer to, can we get a grant, then we might not have to put it in the STD, or if we knew, but we don't know those things.
right.
Now, I think one question from my mind to them would be, okay, what if the state gives us matching funds? Can we reduce the STD?
That's a good question. Seems to me that, number one, it's gonna look, I think, very favorable that we are applying for a grant. We're doing our due diligence.
Right.
And I would think that if you pose that to them and say, if we are approved for a grant, we'd like to also consider reducing the STD by the equivalent amount of the, $12,000 a year.
Right.
If that doesn't overly complicate this process, which is already
It's
kind
all, it's all,
Yeah, it is.
it would be nice, and
And the
What
STD
if
has to
we-
be
the
approved.
fact that the deadline on the grant package is the 15th of December, I would be hopeful that maybe we'd hear something from the state. Well, okay, no chance, or, yeah, it looks pretty good, for at least some of it. If we knew something from them, that would help us tailor the STD.
by March 15th,
Well,
I'd be
yeah,
shocked if the state.
I would be shocked.
I would too. And the thing is, the STD has to be approved and by like the 1st of June, so they can figure out the new tax bills.
Yeah, so what if we leave that alone, but then take the mandatory assessment or something which it's in our power, I guess, to raise it, or we can
Sure.
do the equivalent amount there. I mean, for as a homeowner, it's the same amount I'm paying anyway.
Right,
Right,
So,
it doesn't happen, yeah, you're right.
that's true. That's an option.
and an easier one, it's in our control.
And our budget doesn't, well, then the community has to approve it, but I don't think that would be much of
I
an
mean,
issue.
it's control. I think we
the
could get
association budget has to
a
be in
fee cut
place.
through pretty easily though. I don't think we'll have a problem.
Well, and I think the association budget, it gets approved at the June meeting, so you have to have that done in time to get published in the newsletter. So, nobody goes on vacation for the entire, after whatever your last one is, in April or something, because it seems like it's gonna be really, Lauren's wedding is in May.
When does the finance committee have to meet again? I
Ah,
have to start thinking
yeah,
about
you
that.
can start thinking, I don't know.
All right.
It'd be hard to get it all together and coordinated, to have it come out, the way we need to have it come out.
Another thing, I guess it really is under unfinished business, and I sent everybody a note. Kurt Larson accepted, or I twisted his arm and he volunteered to chair the nominating committee. And now he's got Libby Fall and Nancy Reary, who's Gary's wife, will be on the committee with him, and Dennis Baker, Dennis was gonna be the backup alternate. And he also said that Susan Rourke has expressed interest in running for the board. Now, I don't know, are we gonna have a vacancy? No, people have sort of said that they're planning on staying on, but if somebody wanted to not, Susan apparently has interest in running.
And did you talk with Mike to come out?
I'm deciding not to continue.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that if Susan definitely wants to have?
Well, yes, obviously, being evaluate, I don't wanna leave and put, this board into any difficulties, because I've heard from a number of people how well the board, works together, as a group, and, and so, I wanna make sure that whoever is, that you decide on, so if you decide on Susan, then I'd be glad to step down.
So you're saying, just to save having to send out a ballot? The cost of sending out a ballot, if you have just the right number of people for the right number of slots, then you don't have to send out the ballot.
Unless at the.
Unless somebody,
Unless
somebody-
somebody can
or
step up
someone
anytime, that's
jumps
Right,
up.
somebody, anybody could
anytime, yeah.
throw their
Yeah,
name in,
yeah.
or hat in the ring, but, okay, well, I don't wanna lose you, but, if you're leaning that way, we can let Kurt know, and he can talk to Susan more.
If you feel comfortable with her, I know she was married or associated with John Zaluski.
But they were like, James Carville and, what was his
Mary
wife?
Madeline.
Mary Madeline.
Right, yeah.
They were strange bedfellows,
Yeah,
In the
yeah, well,
in the sense that they had very different, political and other views,
yeah,
but,
yeah, so,
Now I know who she is.
Was he on the board?
No.
No, but he complained at every, membership meeting,
Yes.
whether it was here or even at the yacht club.
Mhm.
If something would come up, his hand would come up and he would complain. And I knew the wife, because she was the one that introduced us into the yacht club. She was ahead of the membership
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, but that's about all I knew about it.
she's a very, very conscientious, involved person. She's a mediator by profession. So if nothing else, if we start fighting, she can mediate.
Well, if that happens, then I'll have to come back and tell her, get out. I want this the way it was.
Okay. All right, we'll pass it on to, but I don't wanna feel like we're pushing you out either.
You're gonna stay involved with the buckets, welcome buckets.
But you can still do that.
Yeah. Unless Susan, likes to do bucket.